The scene is early 2000s. I've been invited to mediate between a major government in Southeast Asia and a group of a guerrilla group that's been fighting in this country for 25 years, a war of secession. They want to secede. I'm meeting with the guerrilla leaders in Geneva, and we're talking. And the first question I have for them is, I understand your position, what you say you want in negotiation. It's independence. But what are your interests? In other words, why do you want independence? And there was this dead silence. And suddenly I realized that, look, for 25 years, they'd been fighting, thousands of lives lost. Everyone knew what their position was, but where they weren't really sure what their interests were. In other words, what are the key priorities behind that position? And the reason I ask that, why it's so important in negotiation, to always begin with that question of why. What's behind the customer's position? What's behind the boss's position? In this particular case was because they might not be able to get their position, independence, but they might be able to advance their interests. In this case, their interests might be, I wanted to know, what were their interests? Was it economic? Did they want control over their economic resources? Was it cultural? Did they want to be able, the reason they wanted independence was they wanted to be able to use their own language in schools? Was it political? Did they want control over the legislature? Did they want was it recognition? Did they want a seat at the UN? Because once they could focus on their interests, then they could maybe think, okay, how can we use this negotiation to advance our interests, even if militarily it looked like they might be fighting another 25 years, they weren't going to win. So the key question in negotiation is always to ask, negotiation is always about positions. The customer comes in with a certain price, they come in with a certain demand. But ask yourself that magical question, why? Why is it you want that? Because in the end, you may not be able to give them their position. They want the product now at this price next week, but you might be able to meet their interests. What you find every successful negotiator does in negotiation is they're always looking behind positions, your own position and the other side's position, for what are the underlying interests. In other words, what are the underlying needs or desires or concerns that motivate them, so that you can try and address those rather than just talk about positions and seeing if they'll give a little bit here or give a little bit there, which often goes nowhere.